On behalf of the Hawkeye and Safety Planning Committee, I would like to thank everybody for attending our free webinar today. Our partners, Process Management Group and Sword Performance, are with us today. I think, I'm actually not sure if Chris is on the list. I kind of lost track as I was looking at the participant list here. So with that, just a couple of housekeeping things. If everyone would stay muted, please. And if there's any questions along the way, can you all hear me? Okay. Our presenter will have access to the chat box, and you can drop questions in the chat box as we're going through. If Shawn doesn't catch them, we'll catch up those questions at the end of the presentation. So with that, I'd like to introduce you all to Shawn Stasko, who is the co-founder and chief scientific officer of Sword Performance, and he's going to do our presentation today. So welcome, Shawn, and thank you for agreeing to partner with us today.
Sure, thank you for having me.
You're welcome. You should be able to share your screen.
Yeah. Yep.
Whenever you're ready. If not, holler at us.
Yeah, let me see if I can get it. Technology is fabulous when it works. All right. Hopefully everybody can see. Can everybody see the deck, I think, or the title slide?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, awesome. And Tammy, how much time do we have today?
You have an hour if you need it.
Okay, I hopefully won't need it, but I do know that this topic usually generates a lot of questions, and I want to leave as much time for questions and answers as possible.
Sure,
just
that's perfect.
Having done this a lot, I have a feeling a lot of questions will come up at the end, which is great. I love questions.
And looking at the registration list of those who are attending today, most of us are in areas of the states where it is very, very warm right now.
Yeah, perfect. Awesome. Great. So, and I apologize up front. I'm recovering from some bronchitis, so my voice may wane. And so I'll do my best to maintain a voice that you can hear. But otherwise I'm healthy. So this is a brief presentation on just a heat stress review and hydration and how that can help. So the objectives here are three big objectives, are to review heat stress and identify signs and symptoms of its severity. The second one is to review hydration and what that term means, kind of like a hydration 101. What is it? When do we do it? And how do we do it? And then the third one is to evaluate hydration as part of your heat stress prevention plan, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with or have on your own job sites or are taught to create. So just full disclosure, hydration, it's what we do. So this is me here standing at, actually, this is the Olympic Training Center in Colorado Springs in Colorado. I am a hydration and fatigue management expert. I work with our professional athletes and our Olympic athlete population. And I'm also the chief scientific officer for Sword Performance, which is a professional hydration company that works with hardworking individuals and professional job site settings from construction, agriculture, military, heavy industry, things like that. And then all the way to your ultra performance athlete. I have a BS in sports biology and nutrition, and then a Ph.D. from the University of Kentucky College of Medicine, and specifically in fatigue management and what you can do with carbohydrates and hydration to help improve, I guess, performance is the easiest way to say that. So hydration has been a big part of my life, starting from my schooling all the way to what I do on a day-to-day basis now. So the first one, heat stress and severity. How does it develop? What are some risk factors and what are some stages and symptoms? And you hit it right on the head, Tammy. This is a picture of the heat dome that's upon us right now. This was snapped yesterday. where in August, we are expected to have 5 to 10 degrees above average for the majority of the United States. I know you guys are coming from us from Iowa, and it looks like you guys are right in the heart of that heat dome. And so it's not an anomaly. I think heat is definitely here to stay. This is a graph, that shows the trending temperatures in terms of average temperatures across multiple weather data plots and stuff back from the 1800s. And it's significantly started to increase and get larger and warmer from the 80s until now. And it's pretty scary when you look at what the projections show in terms of what the daily temperature could be. And this heat dome is just one example of these weather patterns that sit on top of the United States and just create these abnormally hot conditions. So heat is not something that we are going to see go away. The military is extremely good at helping document what happens in the heat and the cold. And this was a graph that I was given access to by their health system. It was also co-published by NBC. So in 2008, there were 1,700 cases of heat stroke or heat exhaustion in active duty members. And you can see them broken out by different branches there in the lines in the graph. But in 2018, 2,792 were recorded, and that's a 60% increase over a decade. So it's not something that is taking a long time. It's happening very acutely, and it's happening across all branches, most aggressively in the Marine Corps, in the Army, where you're seeing a lot of outdoor grunt work and physical labor, where the heat is a huge impacting factor from training to active duty. So as that graph said, heat stress and heat stroke, and there are all these words that come around and people use kind of interchangeably when you talk about heat and the injuries that result because of them. So I just wanted to take a quick moment to review on what the heck is heat stress. And it's actually a name given to several illnesses caused when the body gets too hot and just can't cool down. They range from the more minor heat fatigue, which is down here, to the life-threatening heat stroke. If someone experiences heat stroke, it's oftentimes associated with a coma or death. So as the heat sets in and the variant symptoms get larger, you kind of progress up this list, and it's a really slippery slope. So how does one get into that situation? So here is a great example of heat gain when our body gets hot. How does our body temperature increase? So internal heat generated within the body by our muscle activity and other body functions, pretty much what we do when we're outside working, when we're walking around, when we're breathing, when we're lifting anything, even when we're talking to each other right now, we are generating heat. Another way that our bodies can gain heat is direct radiation from the sun. That's also basically cooking us from the inside out as we stand in front of it. And then heat transfer. This one also is very sneaky, where from the air, from the ground, and the equipment that we work with, oftentimes those things are giving off a lot of radiant heat or a lot of other heat sources that we don't account for because it's just part of our job. A generator blows off heat to help generate electricity, but that cools the ground around or heats the ground around it. We're standing on top of that heats us up, and we're not sure about that. Or the exhaust from a piece of equipment that we're using or driving is hot. So we gain heat a lot of ways. So how does our body combat that? So we have different mechanisms of heat loss where our body can decrease temperature. Largely in the human being, it's due to evaporative sweat. So heat is lost mostly through our ability to sweat through our sweat glands. Then we also, as a living thing, our metabolism allows us to radiate heat. That's why we have the hot spot left in a chair when you stand up from sitting in a desk chair. When we breathe, we're actually giving off heat. and humidity, and then also when we urinate. So that process is also allowing us to transfer heat away. So heat stress progression kind of looks like this. After 1 to 2 hours, and I'll get back into that question too, our core body temperature rises, and that's kind of the gold standard, is not necessarily your forehead, but what our core temperature looks like. As that core temperature rises, our heated blood is pumped through the skin and moved that way more to help remove heat with sweat, and that heat needs to be released. When we sweat more, and that sweat evaporates to cool. It's the body's normal way to remove heat from our large organs that are generating that heat, mostly our muscles. Then, after about 3 hours, especially in a dehydrated situation, your body is asking for more oxygen and more nutrients to continue doing the work that you are asking it to do. And then you get into these situations where you'll feel headaches, muscle fatigue and tiredness that you're not used to, just general loss of strength, loss of accuracy and dexterity, which can lead to other injuries. Heat cramps is a big one, where you'll feel your muscle cramp up or get tight, and muscles that you're using on a pretty regular basis. Reduced alertness, which is terrible because it can result in lots of other injuries. And then just general nausea. So that's pretty much after 3 hours. So if you think about that time window, if you start your shift at 7 a.m., by 10 a.m., this could literally be your person or the people who are working in your environment. They're all falling down the hill if they're not properly acclimatized, or hydrated, or rested, things like that. And it's a pretty detrimental, sneaky thing. I want to call quick attention to the muscle cramps one. This is a big question we get a lot, because it's painful and it's difficult to treat, and there's been a lot of conversation about that. So in the literature and kind of what we see now, the 3 known causes of muscle cramps, exercise-induced muscle cramps or heat-induced muscle cramps, are an electrolyte imbalance in your body, an intramuscular energy imbalance where your muscles don't have enough energy to continue working, or a neurological disruption where your nerves can't continue to fire signals, and then your muscles kind of get into this broken routine where they can't reset every time you ask it to do something. So there's really been no clear definition as to what the actual root cause is. It's some sort of mixture of the 3, but the largest one, electrolyte imbalance, actually can help, if you fix that, can help reduce the intramuscular energy imbalance and reduce the neurologic disruption. So it's pretty important. 4 fast fixes that I always talk about on the job site on how you can quickly alleviate a cramp is a massage. So if it's like your calf, you can massage your calf. You can stretch the muscle that is tight. That's not always the most enjoyable feeling, but it actually is helping you. You can cool the skin, so you can put ice packs, you can have a fan, you can get out of the sun or out of the radiant heat. And then also rehydrate with electrolytes and fuel on the inside. So a lot of those things are exterior, except for the last one, which is rehydrate on the inside. That will help your body kind of reset the mechanisms that are going on. So this is a diagram that I show a lot, and I encourage you guys to keep this in mind too. Heat stress is a very kind of fluid subject, and a lot of people have a hard time describing what it looks like or feels like or how we can fix it. So think of heat stress like cooking an egg in boiling water, which I'm sure we all have done. I am no chef, but I certainly have boiled eggs before. So how do you cook, or how do you cool eggs in a pot of boiling water? Imagine this is us on a roof site when we're out there for 7 hours and it's really hot and we're the egg. How do you do that? Well, you can, to the egg, you can add cold water to this boiling pot, and that will help cool the temperature down. You can turn off the stove and rest. So that's kind of like rest. Or you can place the egg in a cool environment. So you can take it out of the water and put it in a refrigerator, put it in an ice bath, things like that. So the big 3 things are give it water, have it some rest, and some shade. And that's ironic because what is OSHA really good at talking about? So OSHA has a very large presentation and lots of resources for us to use about water, rest, and shade. This is how you keep workers safe in the heat, which is ironic because those are the same exact things that you do to a boiling egg in water. So it's definitely spot on. This is a topic of hot debate, pun intended, because OSHA does not have a federal standard that requires the breaks, shade, or water that we know can save lives. And a lot of people have made statements that heat stress related deaths are 100% preventable on the job site. That just happens to come from a congresswoman in California, where Cal OSHA has a nice standard out there already. But I do want to call attention to this. Not for long. So I am one of 16 active members on the ANSI A1050 heat stress standard. We are writing the federal standard for heat stress, where we will specifically outline and give guidance to OSHA as to where breaks, shade, acclimatization, and hydration, and how those can be put on the job site. So while there is not a federal standard right now, there will be. And I am one of the experts on that panel who is actively writing that standard today. Okay, second part of the topic is hydration 101. Just a brief review, some mechanics behind it. What is it, when do you do it, and how do you do it? So water is an electrolyte's best friend. And these two topics are extremely hot. A lot of people like to talk about water, and a lot of people like to talk about electrolytes, what's better for me, for you, for them. But the biggest takeaway here is wherever an electrolyte goes, water is going to follow. That is literally the job of an electrolyte in your body, is to help dictate where fluid goes. That's why we have them. That's why they're there. It literally is a function of how much electrolyte is there and how much water is there and how much of the other electrolyte is around. This is a friend of mine, Rob, who made this interesting diagram about how sodium attracts water molecules. And people often say, well, what do you mean when sodium goes somewhere, water follows? Well, that's not just because they like each other. It's actually because of their charge. If you look at an oxygen molecule, it's negative charge. It's highly attracted to the positive sodium electrolyte, and they grab on each other and they form these little crystal structures. The same happens with chloride, but that's a negative ion, and so it attracts the positive hydrogen ions found in water. So they drag along with each other pretty regularly. And in the heat and during exercise, our blood circulation is increased to the skin and working muscles to aid nutrient needs and heat removal via sweating. So I love to use this emoji because it's a universal symbol for I'm hot and I'm sweating, which is why they included this little sweat drop in the emoji. So sweating is a big part of hydration. So just a brief review on physiologic fluids. So our total body water that we have, everybody always hears we have 5 to 6 liters of total body water, and at any given time, and they're right, it varies, but we really separate our total body water into two various places: inside our cells and outside of our cells. Intracellular is inside and extracellular is outside. And in those two compartments, you have an intracellular side, you have a lot of potassium, and that's on purpose. Outside the cells, you have our extracellular fluid, which takes into account our blood volume, which is what this red block is here. It says plasma. You have a lot of sodium. So the body has a very, very conserved mechanism on how to keep that concentration gradient high, called the sodium potassium pump. And the biggest takeaway here I want you guys to remember is potassium's on the inside of our cells and sodium is on the out. And our blood volume is added here in what's outside of our cells. So that's the biggest takeaways there. Potassium in, sodium out. A lot of people ask this question, and I'm happy to answer it in more detail later. But when you see beverages that are like coconut water, which is a potassium heavy beverage, and You see people talk about salt tablets back when they were kids or things like that, and what's the best way to do it? Why do you have sodium? Why do you have potassium in a beverage? The easiest way is to talk about it in this example of filling up a gas can. Potassium electrolytes, remember potassium in, hydrate, they do offer hydration, but they prefer to drag water onto the inside of our cells for reserves. So it's almost like you're filling up gas cans and then dumping that gas can into your car or your truck when you need it. That's what potassium does. Potassium puts that gas and that water inside our cells for storage for later for reserves. And when we're running low because we're driving a lot or working hard, then you dump it from the cans and you keep going. That's what potassium does. Sodium, on the other hand, remember sodium is high on the outside in our blood. It hydrates like an IV fluid, which is exactly what I deliver if someone comes with a heat stroke or something. We'll drop an IV in very quick. Sodium directly regulates the fluid in your outside of your cells and your blood circulation. So it's as if you're injecting water directly into our car. So potassium is put the water in gas cans first and then save it for later. Sodium is put it straight into the car and we'll keep going. So this is a common question also. When we sweat, what does that look like? So sweat largely is sodium, electrolytes, and water. So 85% of the electrolytes lost in sweat are sodium. And that shouldn't be surprising when you know that the outside of our cells and the fluids in our blood volume has a ton of sodium. And wherever sodium goes, water follows. And what comes out of our sweat glands is largely water. So sodium is going to follow. Yes, potassium is also found. It is also a positively charged ion, and your body is really good at keeping those two separate. But it does come out. And it also has calcium and a little bit of magnesium as well. Those are two other large positively charged ions. But largely, sweat is sodium. And that's why you get the white sweat ring on your hats, or if you ever taste your sweat, it tastes salty. So how much do we sweat? So this is data that I've collected over a couple years working with a couple professional organizations in the steel mill industry. If they're in a climate controlled warehouse setting, it's still fairly high, 80 to 90 degrees. They're losing about half a liter of sweat an hour. When they're outside, maybe working on the rail yard or in the trucking environments, they're losing 3 times as much. So they're losing about 1.5 liters an hour. Then when they're working in extreme conditions that many of us work with and are most concerned about, they're losing more than 2 liters an hour of sweat. And that is a lot of fluid every single hour that you don't always see because it gets accumulated in our clothes. It falls on the ground, we breathe it out, we urinate, things like that, but you're losing a lot of fluid. So with that, how much sodium are we losing? So if you take the average amount of sweat sodium, it's about 805 milligrams sodium per liter. In that same warehouse environment, they're losing about 400 milligrams of sodium an hour. In that outdoor environment, it's about 1,200. In that extreme environment where they're working next to a heavy radiant environment, it's about 1,600 plus milligrams of sodium an hour. That's 1.6 grams of sodium per hour. And that's a lot. So people always ask me, okay, I'm losing a lot of sodium, I'm losing a lot of fluid, but how do I know when to hydrate, with what, and in what environments? And that's where our expertise comes in. It's where performance and really where I've dedicated my education and professional advice to going forward. So I've come up with this little thing called a 1, 2, 3 step on how to hydrate. And I encourage you all to take this and think about it in your own application, and then we can talk about it further. But all this is based off the last 20 to 25 years of intense research on hydration. A lot of it came out of the military. But for exercises, even the most extreme environment, super high humidity, for less than an hour, the recommendation is really just to drink water. Your body's really good at maintaining sodium levels, even in the disease state, and potassium levels. And it's losing that fluid, but you don't really need to do anything further than just water. And I do agree with the Cal-OSHA statement and the OSHA statement about having 8 fluid ounces of water or fluid consumed every 15 minutes, which is about a liter or a quart an hour. It's kind of like a big cup, basically. And that's a great fluid volume recommendation. Then number 2, 2 hours or more. So if you are putting some of your workforce out in a job site where they're involved in heat for 2 hours or more, now you want to incorporate not only water, but also sodium electrolytes. And I leave this very broad because we can get into the concentrations and sources and all this stuff based on what your workplace needs are. But again, follow recommendations of 8 fluid ounces every 15 minutes, a quarter an hour. But then the next one comes in, which is you also want to drink to thirst. So what I mean by that is a lot of people find that this quart an hour is not even close to what they need based on their PPE, based on their workload, based on their physiology, based on what they did the night before. And so you don't want to discourage that. So you always just say, you know what, drink until you're finished, and your body will tell you when you're thirsty. That's why we have a thirst mechanism, because our blood volume has gone down. And then you get to the number 3, which is most common in the workplace. This is 3+ hours of work in the heat, in a hot environment. You want to incorporate all 3 of those: water, sodium electrolyte replenishment, and carbohydrates. And so again, follow the same recommendations of 8 fluid ounces every 15 minutes. You want to drink to thirst, but you also want to incorporate regular meals and rest. And this is where carbohydrates come into play, because you can choose to have those carbohydrates delivered in a beverage, you can have them in a supplement, or you can have them in your meals. And we encourage individuals to have meals, small meals regularly, or fruit or things like that, when they can get carbohydrates from good natural sources to help increase how much hydration is occurring within their body. It's a major mechanism. So the 1, 2, 3, less than an hour, you want to go with water. 2 or more, you really want water and access to sodium electrolyte replenishment. 3+, which is most common, you want to have all 3: water, sodium, and carbohydrates. And that can be accessed through various mechanisms, but you definitely want to encourage meals and rest. So how do you use hydration and evaluate its effectiveness inside your own heat stress prevention plan? I'm just going to give you a brief overview on quick tools that are out there that have been proven and are really easy to use, some considerations for your own work environment, and then further help and kind of what we do at Sword Performance. And then I'll open it up for questions, because I know that's really where the big part is. This is my favorite. It's called C or P. And we encourage this a lot, which is a tried and true method of looking at your urine in the morning, during your middle of your shift, in the evening. If you're working a night shift, it's even more important because your hormones are different. But if you get into these lower levels where your urine is a darker yellow color, brown or red, that's not great. But you want to be up here in a lighter yellow urine chart. And this box up here is always the biggest topic of conversation. What I mean by that is, a lot of people think that if their urine comes out clear, that they are well hydrated. And I want to be clear that yes, that they are you're urinating clear, not because you're well hydrated. That actually means that you've taken in too much fluid, and your kidneys have been told to get rid of some of the water because it's not being stuck in your bloodstream. It's not being stored in those gas cans. It's not even being circulated. Your body immediately is saying, you got too much or nothing else in it to hold on to it, so we have to get rid of it because it could be detrimental. So what I always tell people is to shoot for this level here. you want a slight yellow tinge in your urine. And if you see clear, that's great because you're on the right path, but you should be adding something more to that fluid that you're taking in, preferably sodium, so it gets lodged in your bloodstream and can be used, or with additional carbohydrate. So you want to shoot for this 2-3 space of a slight yellow tinge. That's when you know your kidneys are working adequately. So you'll often hear about people having custom fluid replacement plans and how you can incorporate those into your heat stress prevention plans. So the things that we do and that I encourage you to do look like this. This is just an example of a 1, 2, 3, 4 environment that we've created. But the major considerations that I encourage you to look for in your work environment is how hot really is it? Is it just 90 degrees outside, or do you have those workplace machines or other sources of heat that will actually increase that temperature? So you may take a wet bulb temperature and that's great, but then you have to take into account the machine that your men and women are working with and how much extra heat that generates. It goes into this: what heat exposures are present? Are they standing on ground that's constantly being baked by a piece of equipment, or the sun that's allowing them to actually gain more heat by just standing there? You have to be very cognizant of your environment, how hot it is, what other things are making heat, and then with that, what time of labor is happening? How long are they working in that environment? Are they there for an hour and then they take a break? Are they there for 6 hours? Are they there for 8 hours? Are they there for 12 hours? That adds to the total recommendations on how hydration can be used as an ongoing tool. Then the biggest one, which has created a lot of question more recently, is what type of clothing or personal protective equipment is being worn. This makes a huge impact, and that's why we have these different levels of work zones. Basically, you can see in like level 1, we call someone in a room temperature between 80 and 90 degrees. Maybe they're using machine-assisted physical activity in a warehouse or something like that, but they're wearing street clothes or other brightly colored PPE that isn't any restrictive at all. And then you get up here to the level 2, 3, and 4, where you have a CAF 1, a CAF 3, or a CAF 11. And that greatly enhances your body's ability to remove heat through sweat, because the higher the CAF rating, the lower it is for that sweat to remove the heat, because it's protecting you. So that makes you very much like a baked potato up here in level 4. And it's pretty brutal. So at Sword Performance, this is what we do. This is an example of a poster that I'm just sharing with you guys that we made for United States Steel Corporation, which is an easy thing for us to post for people to say, hey, this is a level 4 work zone identified by these indications here. This is how many of these you should drink an hour based on recommendations. And they post these all over their environments when they're different. So this is in a blast furnace, as you can see here, where they have a lot of radiant heat coming from the furnace. And it's well over 180 degrees in a regular temperature wearing CAF 11 gear. And it's pretty insane how much sweat they're losing. So you can make something like this, but really the biggest takeaway, and that's what we do at Sword, the biggest takeaway is to identify your environment and see what kind of clothing you're wearing and what are your sources of heat. And with that, you can help identify what type of hydration you should be incorporating. So now on to questions. I don't know, Tammy, if you want to do in the chat box, or if we want to have people jump in and talk.
Either way is fine with me. Chat box might be easier since we have so many people
Sure.
to not be asking questions all at once.
Yep.
So if any of you have any questions, if you want to just dump them into the chat box.
I'm going to try and find the chat box.
There we go. First question, Shawn, is can we use sea salt dropped into water in place of sugar-based electrolyte beverages?
So that's a great question. Sea salt is a great replacement for sodium replenishment. It's like the salt tablets that were pretty prevalent back in the 70s and 80s. It is a very easy way to get access to sodium in remote areas. So I would say yes. What I would also say is I would be cautious about the concentration. There are lots of guidelines put out by the military that show kind of in an oral rehydration solution situation how much salt you should be ingesting in different environments. And I'm happy to share those resources with you. But yeah, sea salt is a great source. It's natural. Your body knows how to process it. And it does deliver that sodium electrolyte that you're desperately needing.
Second question, Shawn, why are carbohydrates, oh, I just lost my chat. Why are carbohydrates important during high heat exposure?
Yeah, great question. Let me pull up a resource real quick. And I will share it with you. Can everybody see my screen again?
Yes.
All right, so this is data that I pulled from some of our studies working with construction. And these are various tasks that we observed over a 3-month period. And I put into a nice little diagram. Basically at rest, men and women, you're burning on average about 13 grams of carbs per hour. Even when we're walking, now it jumps up almost 5 times. Now you're burning about 60 grams of carbs an hour. And then if you're pushing something, so you're pushing a cart, you're pushing materials, you're pushing other equipment, that goes up to 85 grams an hour. And then lo and behold, digging, which is an extremely physical task, now you're looking at well over 100 grams of carbs that you're burning an hour. And so even at rest, when the lights are on, you're literally doing nothing and you're relaxing. Your body is primarily using carbohydrates as its fuel source. That's your body's primary fuel source and its preferred mechanism of how to keep calories moving, how to keep our brain happy and our muscles happy. So our body wants to burn about 80% of the total calories. They come from carbohydrates, which is why it's so critically important to use carbohydrates as a mechanism to help our body prevent fatigue. I don't think I have it in here as an appendix, but one thing that I didn't put on here, I didn't want to get too technically in the weeds, but carbohydrates are also an essential component to how your body actually absorbs fluid and nutrients. So in our stomach and in our small intestine, there are these transporters. They're basically gates that say, hey, I just ate a meal. I just drank something. How do I get that into my bloodstream to be used for nutrients? And that is a sodium electrolyte and carbohydrate dependent transporter, meaning if you don't have carbohydrates in that solution, the gates won't open. So you literally won't be able to absorb any of that protein, any of those fats, any of those other things, vitamins, minerals, those things that aren't concentration dependent into your body to be used at all. So it is an essential component, sodium electrolytes and glucose from carbohydrates to open those gates and allow your small intestine to absorb those nutrients to be used for your body. So in high heat, to answer the question specifically, when you are working very hard and your body is exposed to temperatures over 98.6, either inside its PPE or just outside temperatures and humidity, your body's not only trying to cool itself, but now you're also asking it to do something, whether you're pushing, pulling, digging, thinking, making complex decisions, and carbohydrates are being burned at incredible rates in order to do so. So your body, while it has reserves, and yes, that is very important from meals and other things that you're taking in, those burn at a very high rate. And if you don't replenish them, the first thing to go is basically your brain fog, and you start to have cloudy vision, you start to have cloudy thought process, and then fatigue starts to set in from there. And in high heat environments, it's even more acute because the heat is adding that extra element of your body working hard. Hope that answers that question.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, I started to talk and I forgot I was muted.
No, it's okay.
One more question, Shawn. Does caffeine boost circulation to assist in sweating or electrolyte delivery? For example, I'm thinking of something like Rockstar Recovery, which boasts hydration and energy.
Yeah, so I'm familiar with Rockstar and their recovery product. So caffeine used to have kind of a negative rap on in the athletics and the military, where people talk about coffee specifically in overnight shifts where coffee is commonly seen to keep us awake, and it being dehydrating. And that is absolutely true, because one of the things that caffeine does is tighten our veins to slow down blood delivery. But it's recently been seen with some studies that how caffeine is actually more beneficial in terms of delivering electrolytes and other nutrients to our brain and muscles, including neurotransmitters, which allows our brain to turn on and not be so tired. So in a situation like, does caffeine boost circulation to assist in sweating or electrolyte delivery? The answer is kind of yes and no. I think the biggest takeaway that I always recommend to anybody who's using a product like a Rockstar with a recovery or a Red Bull or things like that, I don't say that's great, because it is a difficult thing for your body to digest. But the caffeine is actually sometimes beneficial, especially in those overnight shifts or those third shifts, when it's more important for you to be awake, because it does assist with electrolyte movement and circulation and nutrient delivery. And it's also keeping you safer. So in the question of safety, it's actually pretty important to have some sort of caffeine or other neurogenic on board in the late hours when the sun's starting to go down, or other injuries will happen at a higher rate. So it's difficult for me to talk specifically about Rockstar's product. I don't work for Coke, but it certainly will help in the safety perspective overnight in shifts.
All right, any other questions? There was a question, someone asked if there will be access to your PowerPoint.
Yeah, and that's fine. I think we talked about that earlier, Tammy, which was, I'm happy to give everybody access to the PowerPoint and these diagrams and this data, and the easy way to remember these kind of topics and things, the 1, 2, 3, the sweat specifics and stuff like that. The egg boiling in the water is pretty popular too.
If you, if you just want to send them to me, then we can send them out to those who have attended today. We are also recording this, so yeah, there will be opportunities where we may repost it as the heat continues, just as a friendly reminder.
Unfortunately, that heat's not going away, and it's something that we all have to deal with. I'm out in the middle of it as well. At Sword Performance, we do these custom hydration plans in relation to heat stress prevention plans, where we help and we integrate hydration based on what environments these men and women are working in. And it's just getting more intense. So a lot of the PPE that we see being used with fans and ice vests and different cooling mechanisms are fantastic. But the one thing that I really want to stress is hydration is often overlooked because it's a very convoluted subject sometimes, and people are worried about different disease states and stuff, and that is very important, and I'm well aware. But what you're doing with hydration is it's almost like internal PPE. So while we have hard hats and gloves and all kinds of different wearables and things to help us keep us safe, we really haven't done much on the inside of our body where it's all the magic is happening. So hydration is one of the easiest and fastest ways to help our body fight that heat and fight the fatigue in order to maintain a safer work environment.
Great, thank you. Any more questions? There's a couple of comments I was just going to read real quick to Shawn. There's a thank you, says you did a great job and made this so easy to understand. Did you read those already, Shawn?
I did, yeah.
Okay, all right, then I will read
no, I have the chat box up.
Okay, perfect. Okay, any other questions? Okay, well, if not, again, thank you, Shawn, for taking the time to spend with us today. Great information, very beneficial information. Again, thank you to all of you who attended today, hoping that you can all join us on September 30th for our 2021 Hawkeye and Safety Conference at the Corville Marriott. It will be in person this year. We're kind of back into the normal swing of things. Registration is open. HawkeyeOnSafety.com is the website if you want to check it out. If you want any more information, you can also email me or Brianna, and we can get that information sent out to you. So again, thank you to Shawn and Sword Performance. Thank you to Chris Dickey at Process Management Group. And again, thank you from the Hawkeye and Safety Conference Committee.
Cool.
All right.
Everybody stay safe and beat that heat.
Agreed.